Hey guys, as promised, it is time to review Xenoblade Chronicles 2. As usual, let's check its story, gameplay, graphics, and music. So what is the premise of this game? This entry begins showing us a glimpse of this world, and its main character Reds in a common day in his life, where he's doing some salvaging along his companion, a Tyrant. What's interesting about this world is that everything is surrounded by a sea of clouds, where at the center, the World Tree is found. A place where legend says that ages ago, humans lived there. Humans that had the power to control the heaven, but one day they were cast out. Now they live along Tyrants, which are living pieces of land that float on the clouds, the only places habitable for humans. The issue here is that Tyrants are dying in this particular period of time. Subsequently, these trigger tensions among their inhabitants. As for Reds, he's more like a dreamer, thinking in all the wonderful things that the Elysium may have, and how everyone will be able to live in peace. Some cinematics later, Reds is called by an opponent named Vanna, as they want to particularly hire him to work as a salvager. As this implies a huge amount of money, Reds accepts without thinking twice, despite having to work with perhaps questionable characters. Once reaching their destination, Reds, along other salvagers, dive after a ship to secure it on the surface. But little did Reds know that he was important to get what this group wanted. That is how they get inside of the vessel, where they find a peculiar door which can only be opened by Reds. For his surprise, there was a girl in a capsule and an ominous sword on the ground, sword that had a core crystal, which resonated with Reds. Unfortunately, this meant that this rare blade was linked to him, link that wasn't supposed to happen, and without hesitating, Jin stabs the boy, finishing his life on the spot. My guess here is that as he had resonated with the core crystal, he had the chance to see a glimpse of what was the so-called Elysium, that paradise where human beings lived long ago. But also, he got to know Pyra, who asked him to help her to reach this place in real life. Reds accepts, but well, he was dead. That is when Pyra used a part of her core to revive him, fusion that now links them for life, meaning that if Reds gets injured, Pyra gets injured. This is how their journey began to reach the Elysium. Now, what can I say about this story? I will say that if you don't like the classic Japanese humor, this one may sit on the bad side, as they definitely increase some bars on that department. Using as comparison the first Xenoblade and X, here you will see several jokes, fan service, and the classic Japanese execution along the whole journey. Personally, I don't mind them, but they exist, and they are quite marked. As for the pace, the game wants you to know what is going to happen along the journey. This definitely rewards the attentive ear and eye, because the setting is: humans lived on the World Tree, Tyrants are used to live on this place, and Red's Tyrant knows Pyra. With this, the game has already shared some of the heaviest topics that you are going to find here, and primarily we are going to follow Red's, how his life changes from being a young salvager to the driver of the Aegis. So most of the development is going to follow Reds. For those who want to know more about other characters, sure, you will see some evolutions, but there are some things left aside. On this front, if you wanna know more, you will have to check heart-to-heart conversations and do some quests, but more of this on the gameplay. In any case, if you have played the first Xenoblade, here you will see the other side of the story, as they are linked in a sense. Perhaps a bit convoluted and in a way that made raise some eyebrows, if you like to think in multiple possibilities. But for the kind of setting he's presented, I liked it. Particularly, I enjoyed the chapters 7 to 10, as the story starts to reach the climax, where they get to the World Tree, place where a good chunk of the lore is shown in many ways, and the story takes a much more serious approach. Of course, if you just focus on the main events. With this, I will say that this story is an 8.5. There are multiple interesting settings and thought-provoking moments. Of course, it is a plus if you have played the first game, as there are many things that will make sense. On a really side note, I played the game with Japanese voices, and there are many things that do not particularly match with what it is being said, but in general, the main idea is there. What attracted my attention is that almost 80 to 90% of the names are different. Now, for example, Omura, Hikari, Hana, Saiga, and so on. This, of course, is only recommended for those who are acquainted with some Japanese voice actors. I believe they did a really good job. As for the gameplay, the general flow of the game is about reaching a new area, run around the town gathering some quests, items, a bit of the lore around the place, to then keep working on the main objectives. Perhaps my only comment on that front is that the pointer that shows the arrow that lets you know where the objective is can be a bit wacky. Personally, I didn't pay that much attention to it because oftentimes it was misleading. This is something that happens much more frequently on places with several levels. In any case, the game is wacky enough so you can reach plenty of areas by jumping in places that perhaps are not the intended ones. But it is worth saying that in later chapters this doesn't work, so it is easier if you take some time to understand the layout of the dungeons. Personally, I never lost myself for more than 10 minutes in this process, but yeah, there are places that are a bit too complex. Once you initiate combat with an enemy, you jump into the classic Xenoblade system, which is a bit of action and turn-based. In my humble opinion, a bit easier and simplified in comparison with the previous games. But here it is all about linking combos depending from the element that is used. This is displayed on the top right side, so this gives you the general idea of what to do, and definitely important to pay attention, as you can seal certain actions, which gives you several advantages in some fights. And it is also through this system that you can set elemental orbs, which is all about setting blade combos in the right order, so you need to use level 1, 2 and 3 to set an orb. But this has to be linked with the right element, so if you use fire you can continue the combo with fire or earth, and so on. Then again, this is shown on the top right, but don't worry that much, until you start to fight named bosses or once you reach chapter 8. Before that, this doesn't really matter that much. However, once there, plenty of enemies have some broken moves that can pretty much one-hit KO your whole team, so it is important to understand the system to a certain degree. That way you can cheese some battles in few minutes, otherwise enemies in general feel like sponges of HP. However, this is easier said than done sometimes, because you need to synergize your blades between the whole group, otherwise it can lead to really long battles, like the one on screen, where I definitely messed up several times, and it was more about slowly chewing through those huge HP pools. This is where I can question several executions about this game, because blades are pulled from this gacha crappy system, where you open cores. Now, I do recommend to take a bit of time on this, because getting named blades helps you a lot in the long run, as they have specific field skills, and they require tons of points to level up. So, it is better if you pull them since the beginning. Fortunately, the game gives you a couple of these cores with defined blades, but aside from that, it is pure luck. Legendary cores did nothing for me, and common cores gave me the blades I used since the beginning to the end. Perhaps my most ironic role was Cora, as I got her with my third core. Aside from that, maybe I used around 200, so yeah, poor execution on this to be honest. But do not neglect this part, even if it means pulling generic blades, because you will need field skills along the journey. Turning important, I will say, in chapter 7 to 10. Same idea with the Merc quest. Always try to increase those Merc levels, as you get some special things that will help you along the journey. Otherwise, beware that fixing those things down the line means spending many hours. As for the quest, I would recommend to do some from time to time, but I have to say that some are really annoying, as sometimes all you do is talk to person A, then B, then A, then B again, or gathering materials that a good chunk of times spawn in peculiar places, and sometimes you need to go to place A, B, C, D to then fight a monster 20 levels above you, monster that most of the times will one-shot you. However, it is through this quest that you get access to Blade Quest and some character development, as well as Poppy Cutie Pie in chapter 8. But to be honest, I ended up hating and leaving several of these quests, as they felt a bit cheap. Perhaps I would recommend to set a minimum level to complete them, because sometimes you can start to do some at level 40, but unless you are at level 60, 70, it is impossible to complete them. To me, its gameplay is an 8. In all honesty, there are several executions that I consider quite questionable, as they feel like a hindrance, rather than something entertaining to do. Aside from that, I definitely like the level of exploration that the game offers, as well as every single boss fight the main story throws. In the graphics section I check game performance, creativity and pretty much whatever that comes on the visual part. While playing, I had no issues with the game getting close or stuff like that. However, there are some drops in some battles where there are a lot of flashy things on a screen. Personally, they didn't bother me, but they happen from time to time. And there are some areas that have plenty of things on a screen, where you will feel the drops while playing. For the cinematics, ironically there are also some areas with continuous scenes that ask you to take some steps, load the screen, cinematic, few steps, load the screen, cinematic, and yeah, maybe not the best of ways to follow the story, but it is what it is, I guess. At least I gotta say that I like them a lot. I believe there is a good execution in general. However, what I have to point is that secondary characters were like, meh, just throw random NPCs here and there. Most of them look the same, and there are some species where it is easy to see that they didn't take the time to polish executions. So there is a heavy contrast like in most animes, where the main characters are the flashy gang and everyone else looks quite questionable. Now, I point it like that because there are some side characters with, let's say, important roles for some moments, but it looks like they were just inserted and that's it. On my eyes, it feels either lazy or like it was done like that to save some time, or even perhaps questionable in some approaches. Then again, they don't bother me, but they exist. Aside from that, I will say that I love the general level design, characters, the way some attacks look, and world. There are loads of amazing environments, and I definitely appreciate those moments, as they go in line with what the Xeno games are about. Particularly, I loved how it looks inside the Whale Titan, as there are different executions inside, depending which part of the body you visit. Same with the Eleftherian archipelago. Some corridors are simply beautiful to the eye. In general, I will say that few places are kinda common, or let's say, normal looking. For me, the graphics are an 8.5. Aside from lazy executions and uninteresting side characters, the world presented here is extraordinary. And last but not least, its music. As many other extraordinary JRPGs, Xenoblade Chronicles 2 amazed me with its creative band. This game has lots of amazing neoclassic metal tracks that work really well, literally named Battle, Monster Surprise You, You Will Recall Our Names, which is another arrangement from the first Xenoblade, but it also has plenty of chill tunes like Gromori Forest, Thorigod, Spirit Crucible, and so on, where they use plenty of air and string instruments, delivering that kind of fantastic feeling. Execution that is rich with different instruments like the glockenspiel, and strings like violins, but with a pizzicato technique, which is more about pinching the strings. Throw a traverse flute and you have that magical sound reminiscent to a forest. And if it were not enough, they manage lots of moments with specific tunes to set the stage for those sad or melancholic situations, like Sea of Clouds. Even though there are about 4.5 hours of music, some of these tunes fall into that kind of piece that fit really well some peculiar cinematic moments. And I am not the biggest of fans, but I cannot deny that there is a good level of composition. At the end of the day, they definitely gave the right ambience to the whole game. Yasunori Mitsuda, Kenji Hiramatsu, Manami Kyota, along the Ace group, did an extraordinary work. To me, it is a 9.5. There are plenty of tracks that I appreciate a lot. Xenoblade Chronicles 2 final score is an 8.6. In comparison with the previous entries, unfortunately here there are some executions that diminish the experience, generally falling under the gameplay category. As for its story, I don't mind the Japanese experience and the fan service, but it is worth commenting about it, as I know it is not going to go that well for many players. But getting past that, it was a really good experience to begin the year. I definitely recommend Xenoblade Chronicles 2, as it has plenty of amazing moments. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.